The wind whipped across the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, carrying the scent of jet fuel and imminent disaster. Captain Sterling Cross stood by the stairs of his $20 million Gulfstream, looking down at the black man standing near the landing gear. To Sterling, the man in the faded windbreaker looked like a drifter, a security risk, someone unfit to breathe the same air as his VIP clientele. Sterling didn't just insult him, he tried to have him arrested. He had no idea that the man he was humiliating was Raymond Hayes, the newly appointed director of the FAA, and Sterling wasn't just cancelling a flight, he was about to permanently ground his own career. This is the story of arrogance meeting absolute authority. The autumn chill cut through the air at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, one of the busiest hubs for private aviation in the world. It was a place where billionaires, celebrities, and politicians passed through like ghosts, insulated from the rest of society by tinted glass and seven-figure bank transfers. On the far side of the ramp, parked proudly in front of the hangar, owned by Stratosphere Charter Services, sat the crown jewel of the fleet, a Gulfstream G6 tail number N880SC. It was a sleek, silver bullet of a machine, capable of flying near the speed of sound, designed for those who believed time was the only commodity they couldn't buy, though they certainly tried. Captain Sterling Cross walked around the nose of the jet, his pristine white uniform glowing in the morning sun. He adjusted his epaulets, 4 gold bars glinting on each shoulder. Sterling was 45, with a jawline that looked chiseled from granite, and an ego that required its own pressurized cabin. He had flown for the Air Force years ago, or so he told people at bars, but he had found his true calling here. Ferrying the ultra-rich, he loved the deference, the tips, and the feeling of superiority that came with looking down on the groundlings. He checked his watch. Elos Rahust. The client, a tech mogul named Harrison P. Gallagher, was due in 30 minutes. Gallagher was the type of passenger who complained if the ice cubes clinked too loudly. Everything had to be perfect. "Hey, you!" Sterling's voice cracked like a whip across the tarmac. He had spotted someone near the left wing of his aircraft. Standing by the landing gear was a man who looked entirely out of place in this world of polished aluminum and ego. He was an older black man, perhaps in his late 50s, wearing a charcoal windbreaker that had seen better days, simple beige slacks, and thick-soled walking shoes. He held a small, battered notebook in one hand and was peering intently at the hydraulic lines of the main landing gear. The man didn't flinch at Sterling's shout. He simply finished writing a note, capped his pen, and turned slowly. His face was calm, lined with the kind of patience that comes from raising children or dealing with government bureaucracy. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that slid slightly down his nose. "Can I help you, Captain?" the man asked, his voice a deep, steady baritone. Sterling marched over, his boots clicking aggressively on the pavement. He stopped 3 feet from the man, invading his personal space. "Help me. You can help me by getting the hell away from my aircraft. Who let you out here? Maintenance shift changed an hour ago, and you aren't wearing a vest." The man, whose name was Raymond Hayes, adjusted his glasses. "I noticed some hydraulic fluid weeping near the strut. It looks fresh. I was just taking a look." Sterling let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Oh, you were taking a look? You're a mechanic now? Let me guess. You wandered over from the janitorial crew to give me advice on a $60 million jet?" Raymond's expression didn't change. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Fluid leaks on a G650 aren't something to ignore, Captain. If that seal blows on landing—" "I know my bird," Sterling barked, cutting him off. "I've logged 5,000 hours in type. I don't need a lecture from some wandering stray." He looked Raymond up and down, his eyes narrowing with blatant prejudice. This is a secure area. Stratosphere Charter services VIPs, people who pay to avoid seeing people like you. Raymond raised an eyebrow. People like me? People who don't belong, Sterling sneered. People who look like they should be asking for spare change, not inspecting avionics. You're making the place look cheap. Now, move along before I call the airport police and have them drag you off for trespassing. Raymond closed his notebook slowly. I have a right to be here, Captain. And regarding the tire pressure on the number 2 main gear, it looks low. Visibly low. Have you checked the logs this morning? Sterling felt the heat rise up his neck. It was one thing to be annoyed. It was another to be questioned on technicals by someone he perceived as inferior. To Sterling, Raymond fit a profile. The invisible service class, the people who cleaned the toilets and emptied the trash. He wasn't supposed to know what tire pressure was. Listen to me, Grandpa. Sterling stepped closer, his finger pointing at Raymond's chest. I don't know what YouTube video you watched to think you're an expert, but you are unfit to be within 50 feet of this VIP aircraft. You're a security risk. You're dirty, you're unauthorized, and you're bothering the flight crew. Unfit, Raymond repeated the word, testing its weight. That's a strong word, Captain Cross. It's the right word, Sterling spat. Now beat it, or I'll make sure you lose whatever low-wage job you're hiding behind. Raymond held Sterling's gaze for a long moment. There was a flicker of something dangerous in the older man's eyes. Not violence, but the heavy, crushing weight of authority withheld. I'll step back, Raymond said softly. But I suggest you check that strut, Captain. Get lost. Sterling turned his back on him, dismissing him as he would a stray dog. He walked back toward the stairs, pulling out his phone to text the first officer, a younger man named Kyle, who was currently inside prepping the cockpit. Sterling. Text. Some hobo was messing with the landing gear. Keep an eye out. I chased him off. Sterling didn't see Raymond retreat to the edge of the hangar, where he didn't leave. Instead, Raymond leaned against a yellow bollard, took out his phone, and made a call. Director Hayes here, Raymond said into the phone, his voice dropping to a command frequency. I need the FSDO, Flight Standards District Office team on standby at Teterboro, Sector 4. Yes, I've found a Part 135 operator that needs an immediate ramp inspection, and get the local police. I have a feeling the pilot is going to make this difficult. 20 minutes passed. The morning sun climbed higher, glaring off the white fuselage of the jet. A black Cadillac Escalade rolled onto the tarmac, flagged through by the gate security. Sterling straightened his tie and put on his best customer service smile. This was showtime. He descended the stairs to greet Harrison P. Gallagher. Gallagher stepped out of the car. He was a man in his 30s, dressed in a sharp Italian suit, holding a tablet. He looked stressed. Beside him was his assistant, a nervous woman named Stella, struggling with 3 large garment bags. Good morning, Mr. Gallagher. Sterling beamed, extending a hand. Welcome aboard. We're fueled and ready. Flight time to London is 6 hours and 12 minutes. Smooth air expected all the way. Gallagher shook the hand distractedly. Good. I need to be online the whole time, Sterling. Wi-Fi better be working this time. Fastest connection in the sky, sir, Sterling assured him. He signaled for the ground crew to take the bags, but then he froze. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the man, Raymond, walking back toward the plane. Raymond was no longer taking notes. He was walking with a purpose, directly toward the Escalade. Sterling's blood ran cold. The audacity of this guy. Was he going to beg the billionaire for money? Was he going to harass the client? Excuse me, Mr. Gallagher, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Please head up the stairs. Security breach. Sterling broke into a jog to intercept Raymond, placing himself physically between the older black man and the billionaire. "I warned you," Sterling shouted, his face flushing red. "I told you to get lost. You are harassing my passengers." Gallagher stopped on the second step of the air stairs, looking back in confusion. "What's going on, Sterling?" "Just a local vagrant, sir," Sterling called back, keeping his eyes on Raymond. "I'm handling it. He's been loitering around the gear, probably trying to steal copper or God knows what." Raymond stopped 5 feet away. He didn't look at Sterling. He looked up at the passenger. "Mr. Gallagher?" Gallagher frowned. "Yes." "I apologize for the delay," Raymond said politely. "But I'm afraid this aircraft is not going to be departing on schedule." Sterling exploded. He lunged forward and shoved Raymond hard in the chest. Raymond stumbled back a step, but caught his balance, his face remaining impassive. "Don't you dare speak to him!" Sterling screamed. "You're done! You are done!" He grabbed his radio from his belt. "Operations. This is Captain Cross at Hangar 4. I have an intruder on the ramp. Aggressive male. I need police immediately. He assaulted a crew member." It was a lie, and a dangerous one. In the post-9/11 world, accusing someone of assaulting a flight crew on the tarmac was a fast track to a federal prison cell. Raymond dusted off his windbreaker, where Sterling had shoved him. "Assault?" Raymond asked calmly. "There are cameras on the hangar, Captain. They saw who shoved whom." "My word against yours, pal," Sterling hissed, leaning in close so Gallagher couldn't hear. "And who do you think they're going to believe? The captain of a G650, or the guy who looks like he sleeps under a bridge?" "Sterling!" Gallagher called out from the stairs. "Who is this guy? We need to go." "He's nobody, sir. Just a crazy person," Sterling yelled back. "Police are on the way." Raymond looked at Sterling with a mixture of pity and resolve. "You really should have checked the strut, Captain, and your attitude. Both are leaking." "Shut up!" Sterling pointed to the ground. "Sit down! Hands where I can see them!" The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder rapidly. 2 Port Authority police cruisers sped across the tarmac, lights flashing blue and red against the grey concrete. Sterling smirked. "Here comes the karma, buddy. You wanted to play big shot? Now you go to jail." Raymond didn't sit. He reached into his inner pocket. "He's got a weapon!" Sterling screamed, backing away and raising his hands theatrically to alert the approaching officers. "Gun! He's reaching!" The police cars screeched to a halt. 4 officers spilled out, hands hovering near their holsters. "Drop it!" one officer shouted at Raymond. "Hands in the air! Now!" Raymond froze. He moved his hands slowly away from his body, palms open. "I am reaching for my identification," he said loudly and clearly. "I am a federal officer." Sterling laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Federal officer? Yeah. And I'm the Queen of England. He's a bum. He tried to sabotage the plane." The tension on the tarmac was thick enough to choke on. The wind howled, whipping Raymond's jacket around him. He stood surrounded, the wealthy pilot sneering, the confused billionaire watching from the stairs, and 4 police officers with adrenaline pumping through their veins. It was the perfect trap. Sterling had constructed a narrative that fit his worldview. The successful pilot versus the dangerous intruder. He thought he had won. He thought he was about to see this man thrown into the back of a squad car. He was wrong. The lead police officer, a sergeant named Kowalski, advanced cautiously. "Sir, keep your hands visible. Turn around slowly." Raymond complied, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who knew exactly how dangerous a misunderstanding could be. "Sergeant," Raymond said calmly, not turning around yet. "Check my back pocket. You'll find a leather wallet. Inside is a PIV smart card and a gold badge." "Don't listen to him," Sterling shouted from the side. "Just cuff him." "Quiet!" Kowalski snapped at the pilot. He approached Raymond, patted him down, and reached into the back pocket. He pulled out the wallet. He flipped it open. The sun caught the gold shield embedded in the leather. It wasn't a standard police badge. It was the seal of the Department of Transportation, with the eagle spreading its wings. Below it, the text was engraved in bold black letters. Federal Aviation Administration Director of Flight Standards, and below that, the ID card. Raymond Hayes, Administrator Level 1. Sergeant Kowalski stopped. He blinked. He looked at the photo on the ID, then at the back of Raymond's head, then back at the ID. The blood drained from Kowalski's face. He knew what this meant. In the world of aviation, the FAA was God. And this man wasn't just an employee, he was the burning bush. "Holster your weapons!" Kowalski shouted to his team, his voice cracking slightly. Stand down immediately." The other officers looked confused but obeyed, clicking their safety straps back on. Kowalski stepped back and practically snapped to attention. "Sir, Mr. Director, I apologize. We had a report of an active threat." Raymond turned around slowly, taking his wallet back. He didn't look shaken. He looked like a judge ready to pass a sentence. "You were doing your job based on bad information, Sergeant. No harm done." Sterling stood by the wing, his mouth slightly open. The smirk was faltering, replaced by a twitch of confusion. "What? What is this? Why aren't you arresting him?" Raymond ignored Sterling for a moment and turned to the police officer. "Sergeant, I need you to detain this aircraft. Nobody boards, nobody leaves. This is now an active federal investigation site." "Yes, sir," Kowalski nodded. "Hey." Sterling marched forward, though with less confidence than before. "You can't do that. I have a schedule. Who do you think you are showing some fake badge?" Raymond turned to face Sterling. The silence that followed was heavy. Raymond walked forward until he was standing exactly where Sterling had invaded his space earlier. "Captain Cross," Raymond said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a collapsing building. "I am Raymond Hayes. I am the director of the FAA's Flight Standards Service. I oversee the certification, regulation, and inspection of every civil aircraft in the United States airspace." Sterling blinked. His brain was trying to process the information, but his ego was fighting it. "Bullshit! You? Look at you. You're—" "I'm what?" Raymond challenged. "Unfit?" Sterling swallowed hard. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. "I tried to conduct a casual ramp check," Raymond continued, his voice hardening. "I tried to warn you about a hydraulic leak on your left main strut. A leak that, if you had taken off, likely would have caused a brake fire upon landing in London. Instead of thanking me, or even checking the logbook, you insulted me. You racially profiled me. You assaulted me." "I didn't assault," Sterling stammered. "You shoved a federal officer in the performance of his duties," Raymond said. "That's a felony, Captain. But that's a matter for the police. My concern is your fitness to fly." Raymond pulled a radio from his pocket, not a cheap walkie-talkie, but a government-issue band radio. "Team Alpha, move in." From around the corner of the hangar, where they had been waiting out of sight, a white van pulled up. The side door slid open, and 4 men and women in FAA vests stepped out, carrying clipboards and inspection gear. They were the A-team of aviation inspectors. Raymond pointed at the jet. "Ground it. I want a full conformity check. Logbooks, maintenance records, crew duty times, and weight and balance. And check that left strut." Gallagher, the billionaire, had come down the stairs. He looked from Sterling to Raymond. He was a businessman. He knew when a deal had gone south. "Captain Cross," Gallagher said, his voice cold. "Is this true? Is there a leak?" Sterling looked at his client, panic rising in his chest. "Mr. Gallagher, it's a minor weeping. I was going to log it, but—" You told me the plane was perfect, Gallagher said. He turned to Raymond. Director Hayes, is it? It is. Raymond nodded politely. Is this plane safe? Visibly. No, Raymond said, and the pilot's judgment is currently compromised by arrogance and rage. I would not recommend flying with him, Mr. Gallagher. Gallagher nodded. He turned to his assistant. Stella, get the bags. Call NetJets. Get us another bird. Wait, Mr. Gallagher, Sterling pleaded, reaching out. I can fix this. Don't listen to him. Don't touch me, Gallagher snapped. He looked at Sterling with disgust. You treated this man like garbage because of how he dressed. You're not just a bad pilot, Sterling. You're a bad investment. Gallagher walked away. Sterling stood alone on the tarmac, the wind whistling around him. The police were watching him. The FAA inspectors were swarming his plane, and Raymond Hayes was standing there, the invisible man who had just become the only thing Sterling could see. You ruined me, Sterling whispered, his face pale. You set me up. Raymond shook his head. I didn't set you up, Sterling. I just showed up. You did the rest yourself. Raymond opened his notebook again. Now let's talk about your pilot's license. I'm going to need to see it, and bring your medical certificate too, assuming you haven't lied on that as well. The drama was far from over. Sterling wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and the hard karma Raymond had promised was only just beginning. The wind on the tarmac seemed to have died down, replaced by a suffocating silence that hung over Hangar 4. The only sounds were the scratching of pens on clipboards and the mechanical whir of the FAA inspectors dismantling the cowling of the left engine. Captain Sterling Cross paced near the nose gear, his phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. He had tried calling the owner of Stratosphere Charter, Preston Wells, 3 times. 3 times it had gone to voicemail. Raymond Hayes stood by a folding table that his team had set up near the wing. He was reviewing a stack of logbooks that had been retrieved from the cockpit. He moved with the methodical slowness of a glacier, unstoppable and crushing. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was toxic. Sterling climbed up the stairs, needing to control the narrative before the inspectors got to his first officer, Kyle Bennett. Kyle was 26, a low-time pilot building hours, desperate to make it to the major airlines. He was sitting in the right seat, staring at the flight management system, looking pale. Kyle, Sterling hissed, closing the cockpit door behind him. Kyle jumped. Captain, what's happening out there? I see police. I see the feds. You said it was just a vagrant. It's a setup, Sterling lied, wiping sweat from his upper lip. That guy Hayes, he's got a vendetta. He's looking for anything to pin on us. Listen to me carefully. Sterling grabbed the shoulder of Kyle's uniform, his grip digging in hard. The hydraulic warning light that flickered yesterday on the leg from Miami? The one we cycled the breaker to clear? Kyle's eyes widened. The one we were supposed to write up? You told me not to. You said it was a sensor glitch. It was a sensor glitch, Sterling snapped. But if these feds find out we cleared a master caution without logging it, they'll bury us. They'll revoke your ticket, Kyle. You'll never fly for Delta. You'll be lucky to fly a crop duster. But if there's a leak, Kyle stammered. There is no leak, Sterling shouted, then lowered his voice as he saw a shadow move near the windshield. Look, we stick to the story. The plane is perfect. We did the pre-flight together. We saw nothing. If they ask about the logbook gaps, it was an administrative error. Do you understand? Your career depends on backing me up. Before Kyle could answer, the cockpit door opened. Standing there wasn't Raymond, but a woman with a severe bob haircut and an FAA lanyard. This was Inspector Halloway, a lead avionics specialist. Captain Cross, First Officer Bennett, she said, her voice devoid of warmth. Please step out of the aircraft. We need to conduct a separate interview with each of you regarding the maintenance history of N800 ATSC. Separate? Sterling forced a smile. No need for that. We operate as a crew. We can answer together. That wasn't a request, Holloway said. She turned to Kyle. Mr. Bennett, you first. Come with me. Sterling squeezed Kyle's shoulder one last time, a silent threat. Keep your mouth shut. Kyle unbuckled his seatbelt. He looked at Sterling, then at the inspector. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He had seen how Sterling treated the ground crew, the caterers, and just now, the man who turned out to be the FAA director. Kyle realized that loyalty to Sterling Cross was a suicide pact. As Kyle walked past Sterling, he didn't make eye contact. He walked down the stairs and into the sunlight where Raymond Hayes was waiting. Sterling watched from the top of the stairs, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw Raymond greet Kyle with a handshake, not the aggressive posturing Sterling used, but a firm, respectful greeting. He saw Raymond ask a question. He saw Kyle hesitate, looking back at the plane, and then Sterling saw the moment his life ended. Kyle nodded. He pointed to the cockpit. Then he pointed to the landing gear. Then, damningly, he mimed the action of pulling a circuit breaker. Raymond didn't smile. He just wrote it down in that battered notebook. Sterling slammed his hand against the fuselage. "Traitor," he whispered. "Captain Cross." Sterling looked down. Raymond was looking up at him, removing his glasses. "Your first officer has just voluntarily disclosed that you ordered him to suppress a hydraulic pressure warning light on the previous flight leg," Raymond called out, his voice carrying across the quiet ramp. "He also states you manually reset the circuit breaker to clear the fault without logging the event. Would you like to come down and comment on that?" Sterling felt the ground tilting beneath him. That was a direct violation of 14 different federal regulations. It wasn't just negligence, it was falsification of records. It was criminal. He walked down the stairs, his legs feeling like lead. "He's lying," Sterling croaked. "The kid is incompetent. He's trying to save his own skin." "We'll see," Raymond said. He turned to Inspector Holloway. "Check the non-volatile memory in the flight computer. If they pulled the breaker, the computer will have a time-stamped event code. It doesn't forget, even if the pilot does." Sterling froze. He had forgotten about the internal memory logs. The plane was smarter than he was. "While she does that," Raymond said, stepping closer, "we need to talk about your drug and alcohol test." "What?" Sterling recoiled. "I'm sober. I haven't touched a drop in 24 hours. "Standard procedure for an accident or incident investigation," Raymond said calmly. "And considering your erratic behavior, your aggression, and your dilated pupils, I have reasonable cause to demand a toxicity screen immediately." "This is harassment," Sterling screamed, his composure finally shattering completely. "You're doing this because of what I said, because I hurt your feelings. I'm doing this," Raymond said, leaning in, "because you were about to put 6 people in a metal tube at 45,000 feet with a leaking hydraulic strut and a falsified maintenance log. I'm doing this because you are a danger to the public." Raymond checked his watch. "And here comes the man who's going to explain why he hired you." A silver Bentley sped onto the tarmac, bypassing security with a special pass. It screeched to a halt next to the police cars. Preston Wells, the CEO of Stratosphere Charter, got out. He was a short, angry man who hated losing money more than he hated losing limbs. Preston Wells didn't look at his pilot. He walked straight to Raymond Hayes, his hand extended, a look of desperate apology plastered on his face. Director Hayes, my God!" Preston gushed, sweating through his silk suit. "I came as soon as I heard. I was in a meeting in Manhattan. Please tell me there's been a misunderstanding." Raymond ignored the handshake. Mr. Wells, your aircraft is grounded. Your operating certificate is suspended pending a full audit. Preston turned purple. Suspended? The whole fleet? Director, surely we can isolate this to just one bad apple? He gestured vaguely at Sterling. Sterling stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Preston, listen to me. This guy is power-tripping. The plane is fine. Kyle panicked and lied about the sensor. We can still— Shut up, Sterling! Preston roared. The sound echoed off the hangar walls. You shut your mouth right now. Preston turned back to Raymond, his voice trembling. Director, whatever this man did, it does not reflect the values of Stratosphere Charter. Doesn't it? Raymond asked. He opened his notebook. I've been looking at your company culture, Mr. Wells. I made a few calls while I was waiting. It seems Captain Cross has had 3 noise complaints, 2 customer service complaints regarding aggressive behavior, and a prior incident at Teterboro, where he refused to let a female refueling agent touch the aircraft. You promoted him to chief pilot 2 months ago. Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You reward this behavior, Raymond said. You prioritize on-time departures over safety. Captain Cross is a symptom, Mr. Wells. You are the disease. I had no idea, Preston lied weakly. And, Raymond continued, pointing to the hydraulic leak that was now forming a visible puddle on the concrete. Your chief pilot just tried to fly a billionaire across the Atlantic with a compromised landing gear. If that gear had collapsed on landing at Heathrow, with the media watching, your company wouldn't just be suspended. It would be bankrupt. I just saved you $100 million in lawsuits, and you're arguing with me. Preston looked at the puddle. He looked at the police. He looked at Sterling. The calculation in Preston's eyes was visible. He needed a sacrifice. Preston turned to Sterling. The anger in his eyes was cold and absolute. You're fired, Sterling, effective immediately, for cause. You can't do that, Sterling gasped. I know where the bodies are buried, Preston. I know about the fuel hedging. I know about— You're fired, Preston repeated, louder. And if you say another word, I'll sue you for breach of contract and defamation. Get your gear off my plane. I need my flight bag, Sterling yelled, moving toward the stairs. Officer, Raymond barked. Sergeant Kowalski stepped in front of Sterling, hand on his chest. Sir, you are not permitted back on the aircraft. It is a crime scene. My logbook is in there. My headset. They are evidence now, Raymond said. We will return your personal effects once the investigation is concluded, which could take months. Sterling looked around. The ground crew, the people he had ignored and belittled for years, were watching. A fuel truck driver was leaning out of his window, grinning. A baggage handler was recording on his phone. He was stripped bare. No uniform, no plane, no boss. This isn't fair, Sterling muttered, his eyes watering with rage. You people, you think you can just come in here and take everything? We didn't take anything, Sterling, Raymond said softly. You gave it away. Every time you treated someone like they were invisible, you were writing your own resignation letter. Raymond turned to the police sergeant. Sergeant, I want a breathalyzer and a urine sample from Mr. Cross. If he refuses, it's an automatic permanent revocation of all airman certificates under 49 CFR 61.15. I refuse, Sterling spat. I'm not a criminal. Then you're a pedestrian, Raymond said simply. Hand over your pilot's license. Now. Sterling's hand trembled as he reached into his breast pocket. He pulled out the small plastic card, the air transport pilot certificate he had worked 20 years to get. The thing that made him special, the thing that made him a god in his own mind. He held it out. Raymond didn't take it. Give it to the inspector, Raymond said, gesturing to Holloway. I don't touch unauthorized debris. The insult, A callback to Sterling's earlier comment about Raymond being trash hit like a physical blow. Sterling dropped the card into Holloway's hand. "Escort him off the airfield," Raymond ordered. "He is no longer authorized in the cider, security identification display area." 2 police officers took Sterling by the arms. He didn't fight. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find his house burning down. As they marched him toward the public exit gate, passing the sleek jets and the world of wealth he used to inhabit, Sterling Cross realized the terrifying truth. He was now one of the groundlings, and it was a long walk to the bus stop. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at Teterboro, but for Captain Sterling Cross, time had been a blur of lawyers, unanswered phone calls, and a gnawing, cold dread in the pit of his stomach. The hearing room at the FAA regional office in Jamaica, New York, was designed to be intimidating. It was a windowless chamber with grey acoustic tiles, fluorescent lighting that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, and air conditioning that was set 10 degrees too cold. Sterling sat at a small, lonely table in the center of the room. He tugged at the collar of his suit. It was his interview suit, a navy blue Hugo Boss that used to make him feel invincible. Today, it felt like a straitjacket. He had lost 12 pounds in 20 days. The fabric hung loosely around his shoulders. Opposite him, on a raised dais, sat the tribunal. 3 administrative law judges, ALJs, who held the power of professional life and death. In the center was Chief Judge Marcus Vance, a man with eyes like flint and a reputation for ending careers before lunch. To Sterling's left sat the prosecution, Stella Jenkins, a sharp-eyed FAA enforcement attorney who had barely looked at Sterling since they entered. And next to her, calm and immovable as a mountain, was Director Raymond Hayes. Raymond didn't look angry. He didn't look vindictive. He sat with his hands folded over a thick black binder, watching Sterling with a gaze that was clinical, almost surgical. "This hearing is now in session," Judge Vance announced, his voice amplified by the microphone. "Matter of the Administrator versus Sterling Cross. Case number EA 2024-099. The charges are numerous, ranging from violation of Fortunata CFR 91.113, careless and reckless operation, to falsification of maintenance records." Vance looked down at Sterling over his reading glasses. "Mr. Cross, you have waived your right to counsel today. Are you sure you wish to proceed alone?" Sterling cleared his throat. It sounded dry and raspy. "I don't need a lawyer to tell the truth, Your Honor. I have 20 years of accident-free flying. My record speaks for itself. This entire proceeding is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion because of—" he gestured vaguely toward Raymond. "Personal animosity." "We will see," Vance said dryly. "Ms. Jenkins, proceed." Stella Jenkins stood up. She didn't waste time. "Your Honors, the FAA contends that Captain Cross lacks the qualification to hold an airman certificate. On the morning of November 12th, he attempted to initiate a transatlantic flight with a known hydraulic failure. When confronted by a federal officer, he responded with physical assault and attempted to use local law enforcement to falsely arrest said officer." "Objection!" Sterling slammed his hand on the table, unable to help himself. He didn't identify himself. He looked like a homeless person. He was trespassing on my ramp. "Mr. Cross," Judge Vance snapped. "You will speak when spoken to. Sit down." Sterling sank back into his chair, his face burning red. Jenkins pressed a button on her laptop. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the security footage from Hangar 4. The room watched in silence. They saw Raymond inspecting the gear. They saw Sterling storm out. They saw the aggressive finger-pointing. And then, magnified on the screen, they saw Sterling shove the director of the FAA. Sterling watched himself on screen. It looked worse than he remembered. He looked unhinged. "The video speaks to the respondent's temperament," Jenkins said. "But the core of our case is not the assault. It is the aircraft." Jenkins nodded to Raymond. Raymond Hayes stood up. He walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and sat down. "Director Hayes," Jenkins asked, "what did you find when you inspected N800 "I found a severe leak in the number 2 hydraulic actuator," Raymond stated clearly. "Fluid was pooling in the wheel well. If that aircraft had taken off, the loss of pressure would have disabled the landing gear deployment system and the primary braking system. Upon landing in London, with a full fuel load, the friction would have likely caused a catastrophic fire." Sterling scoffed loudly. "That's speculation. It was a weeping seal, a minor maintenance item. I would have logged it in London." Raymond turned his head slowly to face Sterling. "You didn't log it in Titterborough, and you didn't log the warning light on the previous flight leg. Did you, Captain?" "There was no warning light," Sterling lied. He felt the sweat trickling down his back. "My first officer, Kyle Bennett, was confused. He's a rookie. He panicked under pressure." "We anticipated you would blame Mr. Bennett," Raymond said, his voice dropping an octave. "So we pulled the NVM, the non-volatile memory, from the flight computer." Raymond opened the black binder. The sound of the heavy rings snapping open echoed in the quiet room. He pulled out a printout filled with raw data codes. "At 14:02 Zulu on the previous day," Raymond read, "the master caution triggered. Code HYD press LO. 3 minutes later, the circuit breaker for the hydraulic pump control was manually pulled. The system was forced offline. It was reset 20 minutes later." Raymond looked up. "The plane remembers, Sterling. You pulled the breaker to kill the light so you wouldn't have to ground the jet in Miami. You prioritized your schedule over the lives of your passengers." The room went deadly silent. This was the smoking gun. In aviation, falsifying a logbook was a sin. Pulling a breaker to hide a fault was a crime. Sterling felt the air leave the room. "I was troubleshooting. It's a standard procedure to cycle the breaker. Not without logging it," Judge Vance interrupted, his voice like ice. "And not when you bully your co-pilot into silence." Sterling stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Desperation clawed at his throat. He needed to pivot. He needed to charm them. "Look, okay, maybe I cut a corner," Sterling pleaded, his hands shaking as he held them out. "But look at the context. I fly billionaires. Do you know the pressure I'm under? If I'm late, I'm fired. If I cancel, I'm fired. I was trying to get the job done. I have 20 years of perfect flying. You can't take my life away for one bad day." Raymond closed the binder. He didn't sit down. He walked around the table until he was standing just a few feet from Sterling. "That is the problem, Mr. Cross," Raymond said softly. "You keep saying you have 20 years of safety. But we dug deeper." Raymond signaled to Jenkins, who handed him a second, thicker file. "Since your suspension, my team has audited every flight log you've signed in the last 5 years," Raymond said. He dropped the file onto Sterling's table. It landed with a heavy thud. "We found a pattern," Raymond continued, relentless. 6 months ago, flight from Aspen. You departed with fuel reserves below legal minimums because you didn't want to make a fuel stop. 3 months ago, you flew 14 hours straight, 2 hours over the legal limit, and falsified the rest times in the log to hide it. You've been ignoring mandatory service bulletins on your engines." Sterling stared at the file. He felt dizzy. They knew. They knew everything. "You don't have 20 years of safety, Sterling," Raymond said, delivering the final blow. "You have 20 years of luck, and on that tarmac, your luck ran out." Sterling looked at the judges. He saw no sympathy in their eyes. He saw only disgust. Judge Vance didn't even consult with the other judges. He had heard enough. He picked up his gavel. "Captain Sterling Cross," Vance said, his voice booming. "The evidence is overwhelming. You have demonstrated a flagrant disregard for federal aviation regulations. You have falsified federal records. You have endangered the public." "Please," Sterling whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Flying is all I have. It's who I am. I can't do anything else." "Then you should have protected the privilege," Vance replied. "It is the order of this court," Vance read from the paper, "that your air transport pilot certificate is hereby revoked. Furthermore, due to the falsification of records, you are permanently barred from holding any airman certificate, pilot, mechanic, or dispatcher, for life." Bang! The gavel struck the wood. The sound rang in Sterling's ears like a gunshot. "Hearing adjourned." The judges stood up and filed out. Stella Jenkins packed her laptop and left without a word. Sterling stood frozen, revoked, barred for life. It wasn't just a firing. It was an erasure. His identity, his ego, his social standing, all gone in the strike of a gavel. He slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He heard footsteps approaching. He looked up through blurred vision to see Raymond Hayes standing there. Sterling wiped his nose. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, hollow fear. "You happy now?" he choked out. "You destroyed me. I have a mortgage. I have a car payment. I don't know how to do anything else. I'm going to lose everything." Raymond looked down at the broken man. There was a moment where he could have twisted the knife, where he could have gloated. But Raymond Hayes was a leader, not a bully. "I didn't destroy you, Sterling," Raymond said quietly. "You did this to yourself the moment you decided you were too important to follow the rules." Raymond adjusted his coat. "And as for work, I wasn't joking before." Sterling looked up, confused. "Teterboro is hiring for the perimeter maintenance crew," Raymond said, his voice devoid of sarcasm. "It's minimum wage. You pick up trash. You fix fences. It's hard, cold work." Sterling stared at him. "You want me to be a garbage man?" "I want you to learn what it feels like to be the person on the ground," Raymond said. "The person you ignored, the person you called unfit. It's honest work, Sterling, and if you're lucky, looking up at the planes from the other side of the fence might finally teach you the one thing flight school couldn't." "What's that?" Sterling whispered. "Humility," Raymond said. He turned and walked out of the hearing room, leaving Sterling Cross alone in the silence, with nothing but a thick file of his own failures to keep him company. 6 months later. February in New Jersey was unforgiving. The wind howled across the desolate stretch of perimeter road, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that ran along the outer edge of Teterboro Airport. It was a grey, biting cold that seeped through layers of clothing and settled deep in the bones. Sterling Cross walked along the chain-link fence, his head bowed against the gale. He wasn't wearing his crisp white shirt with the 4 gold bars on the shoulders. He wasn't wearing his Italian leather flight boots. Instead, he wore a pair of heavy, mud-caked work boots bought from a discount bin and a shapeless, neon yellow safety vest with the words "Perimeter Maintenance" stenciled on the back in fading black ink. In his right hand, he carried a mechanical trash picker, a metal claw on a stick. In his left, he dragged a heavy plastic bag that smelled of stale coffee, wet cardboard, and despair. Clack! He clamped the claw around a frozen fast food wrapper, tangled in the weeds at the base of the fence. He dropped it into the bag. Clack! A crushed soda can. Clack! A piece of plastic sheeting. Every muscle in Sterling's body ached. He was 45 years old, but he felt 80. The fall had been absolute. The FAA revocation hadn't just taken his license, it had triggered a landslide. When the story went viral, Stratosphere Charter sued him for breach of contract to distance themselves from the PR disaster. His reputation was so radioactive that even non-aviation employers hesitated to hire him. The bank took the house in Short Hills. His wife, who had tolerated his arrogance as long as the paychecks cleared, had moved back to her sister's place in Chicago, taking the dog. Now Sterling lived in a studio apartment above a garage in Hackensack, and he worked for a landscaping subcontractor that serviced the airport grounds. He was the Perimeter Debris Mitigation Specialist. It was a fancy title for the guy who picked up trash so it wouldn't blow onto the runway and get sucked into the jet engines he used to command. A low rumble began to build in the distance. It was a sound Sterling knew better than the sound of his own voice, the high-pitched whine of high-bypass turbofan engines spooling up. He paused, leaning on his trash picker. He couldn't help himself. He looked through the diamond-shaped holes of the fence, his eyes scanning the taxiway. A Gulfstream G700 was gliding toward him. It was a magnificent beast, even larger and more advanced than the G650 he had flown. Its wings spanned nearly 100 feet, curved gracefully at the tips. The fuselage gleamed in the winter sun, a tube of pure luxury and power. Sterling felt a physical pang in his chest, a phantom limb syndrome for the life he had amputated with his own ego. He knew the checklist the pilots were running right now: flaps set to 20, trim set, flight controls free and correct. He could practically feel the vibration of the throttle quadrant under his palm. "Keep moving, Cross." The shout came from the heated cab of a pickup truck, parked 50 yards down the road. It was his supervisor, a 20-year-old kid named Danny, who enjoyed bossing around the fallen captain. "That sector ain't gonna clean itself." "I'm moving," Sterling muttered, the wind stealing his words. He stabbed at a piece of styrofoam with unnecessary violence. Inside the Gulfstream G700, the atmosphere was a world away from the freezing tarmac. The cabin was pressurized, climate-controlled to a perfect 70 degrees, and smelled of hand-stitched leather and fresh espresso. Raymond Hayes sat in the VIP seat on the right-hand side. He wasn't conducting a raid today. He was traveling as a guest of honor to the International Aviation Safety Summit in Washington, D.C., where he was the keynote speaker. Across from him sat Harrison P. Gallagher, the same billionaire who had been on the stairs that fateful morning. "I have to tell you, Director," Gallagher said, swirling a glass of sparkling water. "The change in service quality has been night and day. The new management at Stratosphere understands that I pay for safety, not attitude. You did me a favor that day." Raymond smiled gently, adjusting his glasses. "The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Gallagher. A cockpit is a democracy of information, but an autocracy of decision. If the pilot stops listening to the information, whether it comes from a sensor, a co-pilot, or a man on the ground, the autocracy fails." "Well," Gallagher toasted, "here's to listening." The pilot's voice came over the smooth cabin speakers. "Director Hayes, Mr. Gallagher, we are number 1 for departure. We'll be holding short for just a moment to let a landing aircraft clear. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." Raymond looked out the window. The double-paned glass was thick, insulating him from the roar of the engines outside. He watched the grey landscape of New Jersey roll by as the jet turned onto the taxiway parallel to the perimeter fence. His eyes drifted to the fence line. It was a habit of his, always scanning, always looking for foreign object debris, FOD, always inspecting. He saw a figure in a neon vest, battling the wind. The man was struggling with a large trash bag that had snagged on a bush. The man yanked it free, stumbled, and nearly fell into the mud. Raymond narrowed his eyes. There was something familiar about the posture, the rigid tension in the shoulders, the way the man stopped and looked at the plane, not with the curiosity of a bystander, but with the hunger of an exile. The jet braked, holding its position just 30 feet from the fence. Outside, Sterling froze. The massive Gulf Stream had stopped right in front of him. The blast from the auxiliary power unit, APU exhaust, shimmered in the air, distorting the view, but Sterling could see clearly enough. He saw the passenger window. He saw the silhouette of the man inside. Sterling wiped the grime from his face with a glove that had a hole in the thumb. He squinted. The passenger turned his head. Their eyes locked. It was a moment suspended in time, separated by 2 inches of reinforced glass and an unbridgeable social canyon. Sterling saw Raymond Hayes. He looked dignified, calm, and secure. He looked like a man who belonged exactly where he was. Raymond saw Sterling cross. He saw the hollowed-out cheeks, the grey stubble, the shivering frame wrapped in cheap polyester. He saw a man who had been stripped of his armor. For a second, Sterling felt a surge of the old rage. "It's his fault," his mind screamed. "He did this to me." But as the seconds ticked by, the rage evaporated, leaving only a cold, hard lump of shame in his gut. It wasn't Raymond's fault. Raymond hadn't forced him to skip the maintenance checks. Raymond hadn't forced him to scream at the ground crew. Raymond hadn't forced him to be a bully. Raymond had just held up a mirror, and Sterling had broken himself against it. Slowly, painfully, Sterling stopped staring. He lowered the trash picker. He didn't offer a rude gesture. He didn't shout. He simply bowed his head, acknowledging the defeat. It was the first act of genuine humility Sterling Cross had performed in 20 years. Inside the cabin, Raymond watched the man in the neon vest look down at his muddy boots. "Everything all right, Director?" Gallagher asked, noticing Raymond's intensity. Raymond held the gaze for a moment longer, then turned back to the warm cabin. "Yes. Just checking the perimeter. It looks secure." The engines roared to life, a deep crescendo of power. The pilot released the brakes. "Tower, Gulfstream 700, rolling takeoff, runway 19. The jet surged forward, pressing Raymond gently into the soft leather seat. The fence line blurred into a streak of grey and silver. Outside, the jet wash hit Sterling with the force of a hurricane. The hot exhaust blasted him, stinging his face, whipping his vest, and nearly knocking him over. The smell of burnt kerosene, the smell he used to love, the smell of money and freedom, filled his lungs, choking him. He stood his ground, leaning against the fence, eyes closed, letting the heat wash over him. He listened as the sound of the engines shifted from a roar to a distant thunder, lifting higher and higher into the sky. He opened his eyes. The jet was just a silver speck now, piercing the clouds, climbing toward the sun where the air was smooth and the view was endless. Sterling let out a breath that fogged in the cold air. He looked down at the ground. There was a crushed coffee cup near his boot. He gripped the handle of his tool. Clack! He picked it up. He wasn't a captain. He wasn't a VIP. He was just a man with a trash bag. But for the first time in his life, he was doing the job exactly as it was supposed to be done. He turned his back on the runway and continued down the fence line, one step at a time. This story serves as a stark reminder that the higher you fly, the harder you fall, especially when your wings are built on arrogance. Sterling Cross believed his uniform gave him the right to treat others as invisible, but he learned too late that true character is revealed not in how you treat your superiors, but how you treat those you think can do nothing for you. Raymond Hayes didn't destroy Sterling. He simply allowed Sterling to face the consequences of his own choices. The ending shows us that justice isn't always about jail cells. Sometimes It's about being forced to see the world from the perspective of the people you once looked down upon. If this story of karma and redemption resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps us share more stories like this. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching.